Energy Media readers, there was a survey taken a little while ago about the performance of Canadian provincial governments and their handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, very interesting, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney didn't score very well. On the other hand, BC Premier John Horgan did score reasonably well. So to talk about his survey and what, the results for BC and Alberta, I'd like to welcome Mario Canseco to the interview. So Mario, your company, research company, I guess, you undertook this survey for Glacier Media. So give us an overview of the survey, please.
Well, we started checking the way people felt about the way governments were handling things during COVID-19 back in late March. We thought it was a good opportunity to try to check how the numbers were going. And what was interesting to us is there's a little bit of a shift in specific areas of the country. Municipal governments are also doing better now. There was not much of a change when it came to the federal government, but once you dig down into specific regions, you do see a lot of difference in the way certain areas of the country are reacting to how specific heads of government are handling this COVID-19 outbreak. The numbers are definitely higher in Ontario than they were in late March. They're roughly at the same level here in BC, but there's definitely a fall for Jason Kenney when it comes to his own numbers back in March compared to what we see now this month.
Now that's interesting. Do you have any insight into why his numbers fell?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues that are definitely there. There was a certain sense of dismay that we already saw back in December. We saw that there were two specific heads of government in Canada that weren't connecting very well. One of them was Doug Ford in Ontario, with 60% of Ontarians back then saying that they would be better off with a different premier. And Jason Kenney was number two at 56%. Now it's been very different. We see a lot of people in Ontario reconnecting with what Doug Ford is doing. We don't see Jason Kenney really handling things that well. I think part of it has to do with the fact that he tried to become one of the stars of this. In other parts of the country, we've seen the health authorities talking about these things, the health ministers discussing it. It's a very complicated matter in Alberta because of the intricacies of the health minister right now. But I think when he tried to become that voice, when he tried to be the one leading press conferences, talking about things, rolling his sleeves, a lot of people didn't react very well to that.
Yeah, I know in my social media network, people were remarking quite negatively about the almost now infamous press conference where the premier went on for almost an hour explaining PowerPoint presentations while Dr. Hinshaw stood, off to the wings and wasn't called upon to explain medical matters, which seemed bizarre to people. And what I understand you saying is that actually is affecting people's perception of the premier's performance.
Well, especially when you look at what other jurisdictions have been doing. We've seen other areas of the country focusing on the health ministers, focusing on the health experts more than anything. And essentially the head of government acting as a sort of consoler in chief. We will get through this. Everything's going to be fine. We will certainly deal with certain things when they arrive, but we are not going to be the ones telling you what to do. This is why we're trusting the health experts on this. And we just didn't see that over the past 3 weeks in Alberta. And I think that has a lot to do with residents maybe second guessing whether they would be doing better if they had somebody else calling the shots.
Is it the case that people feel that the Premier Kenney is trying to score partisan points by this performance?
I think that's definitely part of it. What is really striking to me is to look at Alberta as a province where the Liberal Party at the federal level only got 14% of the vote. But the level of satisfaction with the performance of the federal government is in the 60s. And we don't see the same situation with a government that was elected with more than half of the vote 1 year ago. So there's definitely a scenario there where it's the delivery that is changing. It's not necessarily something related to ideology. But when something like this happens, you need to change your tone. I go back to George W. Bush in the United States pre-9/11, all about compassionate conservatism. We're going to talk more about church and state. All that was gone after 9/11. And I think what is happening with Jason Kenney is he's still working with the same playbook. Help us. We need to do something. Oil industry needs to get back. This is a very different timeline. And he's still living with the same thoughts and ideas that he had before COVID-19 began.
Yeah, I've written a number of columns about Kenney in particular and the oil and gas industry in general, arguing that belligerence is a really bad political strategy as a rule. And I think it sounds like you're your numbers bear that out. Now, let's talk about BC for a bit and John Horgan. Now he has, Dr. Bonnie Henry has emerged as a star, and he's let her basically take the stage, and I guess that reflects on his numbers.
Yeah, he's been consistently within the top three. Quebec is a very different ballgame right now. The level of support for Francois Legault is in the 80s and has been consistently. Ontario climbed a little bit. But when it comes to the four biggest areas of the country, BC seems to be doing remarkably well. It was number 2 the last time around. More than 7 in 10 residents satisfied with what the government has been doing. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he has decided when to speak. You know, he only had this one moment when he wanted to talk to everybody. He's let Adrian Dix handle most of this, also Dr. Bonnie Henry. That's the best way to do something like this. And we don't see a lot of appetite for the BC Liberal government handling this. We ask people, do you think somebody would be doing this better if we hadn't had a change of government back in 2017? And the level of nostalgia for Ms. Clark here in BC is definitely low. So it's not a situation where you're looking at it as we would be better off if we didn't have this change. I think when you have those who voted for the BC Greens, those who voted for the BC Liberals saying, I may not agree with everything that Horgan is doing, but I'm satisfied with the way he's handling this, it definitely speaks to trying to be much better at the chance of having more people supporting you. And I think he's been doing very well.
Mario, thank you for this. Plenty of insights here. We really appreciate it. And I have no doubt that before the pandemic's over, we'll be back to discussing this issue again. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.